Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of Everything Kratom, the podcast about anything and everything Kratom. Great to have you with us on this Wednesday morning, hoping all is well with you. I'm doing great today. I had some white Sumatra to start off the morning, and I think I had about 3 grams of it, and it is doing the job, let me tell you what. Oh man, I was so out of it this morning, and it was one of those mornings where if I was a coffee drinker, I would have been like, yep, it's a 2 coffee kind of morning today, gee whiz, you know. I don't know why I see coffee drinkers as 1950s salesmen, but okay. Oh boy, okay. Well, before I embarrass myself any further, back to the point. It did the trick. It woke me right up, and it is a nice, smooth experience. And you know what? It seems to kick in, about as quick as anything can kick in. And I think that white Sumatran has really honestly become like one of those key pillar whites that I'm using these days. And I did do an episode on this a little while back talking about how white Sumatran was like one of the first ones that I think I ever tried. And it was before I really knew what I was doing with Kratom, and I was taking too much of it and getting sick a lot. And so it's like what caused me to stop taking it for a number of years. But it's because I was taking too much of it for my own body, and also like at the wrong time of day and without really eating anything, and et cetera, et cetera. It was just a bad experience. But nowadays, using it, with a bit more knowledge behind it, I find that it's a very, very helpful variety of Kratom for myself. It goes well with the greens, very well with greens, green mallee in particular. And I think that it's just it's a neat type of Kratom. So, white Sumatran. There you go. My relationship with it has changed in the decade of my Kratom experience. So today, what I wanted to talk about was an idea. And this idea came from the title of a very short article. I think it's like 3 paragraphs, not much of an article, but it's in Inside Hook. And the article came out a few weeks ago, and it says, "Is Kratom about to have its own high-end moment? Its appeal is picking up steam." Now, the article itself isn't that long. Like I said, it's just a few, 4 paragraphs. It mentions Kratom kind of on the rise, and how there's some studies looking at it from the 70s all the way up to now, and how there's been these articles recently, the past few years, talking about it, gaining popularity kind of alongside marijuana, etc., CBD, and all that good stuff. So the article itself isn't really what I'm trying to share. It's more of just the idea. Is Kratom about to have its own high-end moment? I love thinking about these sorts of things. It's almost like a fun little thought experiment, because it gets me thinking about Kratom with relation to other substances or herbal supplements, or just like phenomena that comes across humanity and how people deal with it. And then, combine that with capitalism, and what do you get? High-end moments maybe? I don't know. But it's fun to think about. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. Thinking about if Kratom is about to have its high-end moment makes me wonder, well, what does that mean? High-end, like to have a high-end moment, to have a time when there's a peak amount of interest, people using it, but more like high-end in terms of having a variety, having high quality, having a variation in the product itself, so that you can have higher-end products and then, the standard or the lower. And thinking about it in all those realms, I think regarding usage, I think it's still going up. I feel like it used to be like, maybe 1 million people 10 years ago, and now it's more like 2 to 3 million people using Kratom, or maybe, 4 or 5 or 6 million people using Kratom. I've seen numbers all over the place, but it's definitely going up. So people are getting more interested. There's also a number of shops opening up all over the place. There's not just like one chain for Kratom. There's like a bunch of different stores that sell Kratom. There's a bunch of different Kratom varieties in smoke shops and companies. So it's definitely already having that wide-reaching effect throughout the United States. And I guess the, footnote of this episode should be I'm talking about the US. But, certainly you could have this conversation about other places, and that would be fascinating too. But as far as the US goes, I think that more and more people are using it. It's popping up in more and more places. There are also kava bars and Kratom bars now popping up everywhere. So it's certainly becoming a bit more mainstream. Now, all of that with the backdrop of the opioid crisis, and you've got yourself something very interesting. But we're leaving that part out. So here's my thought. I think that we're already experiencing a moment where, in addition to wide adoption and usage of Kratom and how that's increasing, we're in the early stages of that, certainly. But we're already seeing, and have already seen ever since I got interested in Kratom 10 years ago, this wide-ranging, wide breadth of products that really do range from like crappy ground level to premium, enhanced, right? Like all these words are coming into it, but they've been there for a while. And you even find those words on types of Kratom that are really actually like really bad, or have heavy metals in them, or salmonella, or weren't produced well, etc. The quality's low. So I'm kind of like having muddled feelings about this. On the one hand, I think the only way we can go is up. On the other hand, I think that when it comes to, the low end and high end, the low end, there's plenty. Like you can find any type of low end Kratom product in a lot of different gas stations or smoke shops, and it's like made by some random company that no one's really ever heard of, but it has a very flashy, colorful bag, right? And it has some crazy name that no one's ever heard of, and it sounds exciting, and it ends up being like really not great quality. That's a blanket statement. It's a generalization. Obviously, this is generalized, but just from my own experience and as limited as it may be, I kind of feel like that might be the lower end. The types that you can find with the flashy bags, and you can find them in stores, specifically in like, chains of smoke shops and gas stations. That's kind of what I mean. Then you have the middle type. And this makes me think more of like online vendors, but kind of, I'm not mentioning any vendor names, but vendors where it might still have flashy names. I'm not talking about the bags being colorful anymore. They're not going out of their way like that because they it's not like these are on shelves necessarily. So the bags don't have to be colorful and interesting, but the names are. And you find that like this name differs from the name of the same type that would be at a different store. So it's kind of like that. And then there are like the loyal customers that always go to this vendor. They love their certain types of Kratom. They certainly like believe in the company because they keep going back to them, and they find one or two that work really well for them and tell other people about them, and other people are like, I've never heard of that. And they say, well, it's because it's from this company specifically, and it might be called something else somewhere else, but that's different. So that's like middle, I'd say. And this is, again, super general. Again, no judgment in any of this stuff. Like I definitely have fallen into the category of maybe all three of these that I'm laying out here. So no judgment whatsoever. I fall all over the place on this spectrum. So that's kind of my thought of middle. High end, high grade, high quality, whatever you want to call it. I think of that as like almost like behind the scenes. Not behind the scenes in terms of covered up or anything, but like as I'm doing this podcast, I'm learning about what high quality or good Kratom is supposed to be. And it means something different to different people, I think. But something that I keep coming across from different people is like high-end, high-quality Kratom being, the process. You know exactly where the farm that the Kratom came from, was. You know where the farm was, the farmer. Or that the vendor knows the farmer, right? Like the actual company knows the farmer. They went to Thailand. They went to Malaysia. They went to Borneo. And they went to the actual place and tried the Kratom there. And we're like, yes, these leaves, these are the ones. And we'll work with you and pay you a good wage and everything, or pay you good compensation for these Kratom leaves. And then we're going to have like a certified manufacturing process for the Kratom. And we're going to have 3 different lab tests done so that you can see, an independent, 2 lab tests that we've conducted at 2 different points in the manufacturing process, and then an independent lab test from a third party, right? So you have triple lab tested through an approved manufacturing process that's certified from a farmer that and a company that you trust. And then it's like fine powdered, and we have different types of like, coarseness and super fine or ultra enhanced, whatever, I feel like that's considered high end, or at least that's what I consider high end. I mean, how much more high end can you get other than just like going to the country, growing the leaf yourself and chewing on it, picking it and chewing on it, or picking it and making a tea, right? Like, I can't imagine anything more high end than that. So it's interesting to think about in that light, because there's so many things that go into the idea of this is like a high quality product. And so I think that I've had a bit of experience in all these places. I certainly think that I generally fall in the middle in terms of how I go about getting my Kratom. I've tried what I'm considering lower end, or it's not always lower, but it's just like, I don't know what the heck I'm trying. If I'm going into a gas station and I'm trying something that's like called Purple Jungle Kratom or something like that, and I made that name up so that I'm not actually pointing to any company, but like Purple Jungle Kratom, for instance, like, I don't know what the heck that means, you know? There's no purple jungle, so obviously something's going on, and I don't know where it came from, and there's no certified testing on it or manufacturing processes necessarily. Maybe there are, but I haven't seen it. So I don't do that hardly ever, but I have done it before, and I haven't had good experiences with that Kratom. I've never bought Kratom at a gas station or a smoke shop and actually used it all. Like, I've only tried it maybe once or twice, and then I've been sketched out or scared, or I just didn't get much of an effect from it, and I'm like, okay, I don't want to take more of this thing anymore. I don't know what it is. So I actually must admit here and now that I've thrown it out. Like, I didn't use it all. Now, I'm not trying to be a high-end snooty person, right? Like, but at the same time, like, that scared me, and I didn't want to get something like that and ingest it without having more knowledge of it. So then I find myself moving up into the middle, and I'm like, okay, I do care about where it's coming from a bit more than that. I want to know that it's a reputable vendor, so I want to know that a lot of people have used them, and that's certainly moving up the chain, which means that you're not just open to anything that's Kratom. You want more specifics, like you want the same brand, or you want the same process. And I don't care as much about the lab testing, or I didn't, until I started this podcast. Because now that I've been doing this podcast for a while and learning about Kratom, now I'm finding I do care about that. Like, I don't want more than a certain amount of hydroxymetragenine in my Kratom, because I know that it could be dangerous, and I want it to be natural. And if there's just 0.2% or up to 2% of hydroxymetragenine is the active alkaloid, then I know that it hasn't been tampered with, right? Or at least in that regard. So now I'm starting to find that maybe in terms of the lab testing and the quality of the Kratom alkaloids, I'm moving up to the higher end. However, I haven't gotten to the point yet where it's like, I need to know the relationship to the farmer. And this is something that's more of a moral thing with me that I'm trying to figure out, hash out within myself. Like, I don't want farmers to get screwed over because I want Kratom, right? So this is something that's new to me that I'm just starting to learn about more, that I'm starting to pay more attention to with my, with the companies that I do get Kratom from. I do care about that sort of thing, and I don't want it to just be thrown to the dogs and whatever, as long as I can get my Kratom at the end of the day. So I think I'm finding that I'm maybe moving towards more of like the more oversight than the less oversight version of myself. So that might be considered moving more higher end. When it comes to the specific varieties of Kratom, I'm dead middle, I think. I am still not convinced that there's a specific type of Mang Da out there. Like the green Mang Da I get because the vendor seems good and the effects seem consistent with me. That doesn't seem to be the case for most types of Mang Da. So that's why I get the Mang Da where I do. It's not because it's higher quality, and it's not because it's finer ground, and it's not because they know the farmer, but it's because it's a consistent experience, and I trust the vendor enough because there's enough reviews and other positive feedback. And then I find myself in that as well. So I find myself pretty middle when it comes to varieties of Kratom. I don't end up going for a variety of Kratom because it seems like a higher end product. I go for it because it's consistent and people generally all agree that it's pretty good, and the vendor hasn't had any controversies in their past, right? So, like, again, I'm not putting any judgment out there on anyone. I mean, obviously, I'm telling you now that I'm very conflicted and maybe like, hypocritical, like thinking this way and then doing one other thing. Or just, my thoughts converge and they contradict each other sometimes. So no judgment on anyone. This is just interesting, I think, to talk about as we're thinking about Kratom's high-end moment and having this difference in approaching it. I find myself doing it in a lot of different ways. But I think that that's what it is. Like, I think that in the future, I'm going to be looking more towards the farmer aspect. And in the present, right now, I'm learning more about the quality in terms of lab testing and just making sure that it hasn't been altered in some strange, sketchy way. But that's like as far as it goes for me in terms of high end. And I don't want to be paying $1 bajillion for it. And that's kind of something I'm going to have to figure out. But overall, I think that Kratom products are going to continue to get more high end in different respects. But like, as you pass more Kratom Consumer Protection Acts, I feel like, I might be wrong, but I feel like that's setting a new bar. Like, it's setting a new bar on the low end, and it's saying, okay, bare minimum, you're going to know this and this and this about your Kratom products, so it can only go up from there. And now that we're all starting on level footing, now what? How do you set yourself apart now? So that's what I'm going to be looking forward to as we see these acts passing in more states. How does Kratom differ in those states? And do you see a higher bar set for the bare minimum of what sort of Kratom products or quality there is? And it's an exciting new era. So those are all my thoughts for today. Thanks for sitting around in my brain as I rambled on and they knocked around in there. But it's great to be able to share these with you. And I'd love to hear what you think, Do you consider yourself a low, middle, or high-end user? Do you think that my categories are completely wrong and I don't know what I'm talking about? Like, please tell me. I'd love to hear it. Make me wrong. I just want to learn. But anyway, this is just kind of like, these are my natural thoughts when thinking about high-end Kratom or Kratom coming into a high-end moment or, whatever you want to call it. But I think we're getting somewhere, and it's the somewhere that we can discuss. But I know we're moving. And thanks for moving there with me. So that'll do it for today. We'll be back tomorrow, and thanks so much for listening in. You all rock. All right, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.